Welcome back to the Snowpoint Cast. Today we're going to be going over a deck from 2012 called Darkrai Mewtwo. So Darkrai Mewtwo actually got a top 8 finish in the Masters division at the World Championships in 2012. A guy named Yuta Komatsuda from Japan happened to get top 8 with that deck, and this is actually his list that we're going to be going over today. So let's get right into it. Starting off with 3 Darkrai EX. So Darkrai EX has got 180 HP, Dark type, 2 Retreat, weakness to fighting, and a resistance to Psychic, which is actually kind of pretty relevant in this format, to be honest. And then Dark Cloak is the ability on Darkrai, amazing ability. So each of your Pokemon that has any Dark energy attached to it has no retreat cost. So anything that's got a Dark's got free retreat, really nice. And then Night Spear is the attack on Darkrai, a really solid attack. So for Dark Colorless, it does 90, and then you get a snipe 30 on one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So honestly, just a really solid base attacker, and a really good counter to Mewtwo in this format. Because of that Psychic resistance, if you slap an Eviolite on there, it's pretty hard to take down a Darkrai with a Mewtwo, except if you overinvest. And if your opponent overinvests a Mewtwo to take down your Darkrai, you can just take them out with one of your own Mewtwo's, because you play Mewtwo. What a great segue. So you play 3 Mewtwo EX as well. Mewtwo EX has got 170 HP, Psychic type, 2 Retreat, and then a weakness to Psychic. So X-Ball is the only attack that you use on this card. For 2 Colorless, it does 20 times the amount of energy attached to this Pokemon and the defending Pokemon. So early game, you can play some Mewtwo Wars. It's really relevant when your opponent, loads a big Mewtwo. You have to have an option to be able to take that out. Otherwise, your opponent can potentially just sweep you. And as well with Shaymin, which we're going to go over in just a second here, it's a really good late game attacker, because if you have a ton of energy on your board, you can just put it all on a Mewtwo. And even if your opponent has like an empty Darkrai, in some situations, you can just knock an empty Darkrai with a Mewtwo EX with a Shaymin. So really, really solid attacker, and one of the best in the format for sure. Okay, so going to get the support Pokemon. You're going to be playing 2 Celebration Wind Shaymin. This card's really solid. So Shaymin's got 70 HP, Grass type, single retreat, a resistance to fighting, and a weakness to fire. So Celebration Wind is the reason you play this card. It's Poke Power. It says once during your turn, when you put Shaymin from your hand onto your bench, you may move as many energy cards from your Pokemon as you like to any of your other Pokemon. So let's say you've been playing a long game, right? And you attack with a Darkrai, and then you attack with another Darkrai because you have the energy for it, and then they're just taking hits and going to the bench. They might get knocked out, but if you keep that energy on them and then you attack with something else, it gives you the option to just drop down a Shaymin and have like a massive Mewtwo. I almost said Mega Mewtwo, but that's a different thing. A massive Mewtwo in the late game, just to have like all that energy. And then if your opponent doesn't have a Mewtwo answer, like especially if you have an N, you can just go Celebration Wind, move like 6 energy to a Mewtwo. If you need that for a knockout on a Darkrai or something, swing, and then also have that N to be able to disrupt your opponent, so that they hopefully don't take that counter knockout as well, because a big Mewtwo in the active is a little bit of a liability, but N does help mitigate that a little bit. Okay, so also playing 2 Smeargle. So Smeargle is a really staple supporter Pokemon in this format, really solid. So it's got 70 HP, Colorless type, single retreat, and weakness to fighting. Portrait's the reason you play this card. So once during your turn before you attack, if Smeargle is your active Pokemon, you may look at your opponent's hand, and if you do, choose a supporter card you find there and use it as the effect of this power. So really great for, just getting good value out of your turn. It essentially lets you use 2 supporters in a turn if your opponent has a supporter in their hand, and it also lets you conserve your own supporters as well, right? Like if you have a Pont or an N in your hand, and you could use it, but if you use this first, you portrait, and if they have a Pont or an N, you get to get that shuffle draw first, and then you also have the option of potentially drawing those cards again off of the Pont to the N, and then using them in the same turn. So portrait's a really, really great ability, super solid. Okay, so we're going to do some of the trainer cards. So you're going to be playing 4 Junkarm. So Junkarm is a really staple card in this format. Such a good card. So trainer card, discard 2 cards from your hand, pick a trainer card from your discard pile, put it in your hand. Kind of confusing wording with this card just because of how items work in this format. So items they came out in black and white, and how they differentiated between different like trainer types. Instead of, in the Heart Gold Soul Silver block, it was trainers, stadiums, and supporters. And now it's items, which is trainers and tools, and then supporters and stadiums. So a little bit different, but essentially the same thing. And what it means is it just lets you take back cards that you can play as many of in a regular turn as you would have liked to, right? Like you can take back dual balls, or like switches, or plus powers, like anything that you were able to use more of in the single turn. Let's put it like this: if you can play it and junk arm for it and play it again, then you can junk arm for it. I guess that doesn't even make sense, because you have to know if you can junk arm for it or not. Anyway, single use, anything that's not like supporter or stadium essentially is what you can grab with junk arm. Okay, moving on. Okay, so 4 Dark Patch. Dark Patch is really good in every Darkrai deck, and every Darkrai deck should be playing 4. It's an amazing card. The Dark Patch says attach a basic Dark Energy card from your discard pile to one of your bench Dark Pokemon Pokemon. So this is obviously really good for Darkrai, right? Like you can potentially get a turn 1 Darkrai in this format. If you go attached to Darkrai, Dark Patch, and then you get a Darkrai. That's not as easy as it sounds. You have to get some combos off. But if you have some stuff, like let's say you go play a trainer card, and then you can junk arm some dark energies away, and then grab a trainer card back and then go double dark patch. Or if you have played a dark patch already, you can go dark patch, junk arm some darks for a dark patch again, and then get the second dark patch that way. There's a lot of ways you can combo into a turn 1 Darkrai, and 4 with 4 junk arm just lets you hit that pretty consistently. That's one of the big threats of this deck, is it's able to hit a turn 1 Darkrai. And then into the late game as well, that acceleration makes your Mewtwo's really deadly with that Shaymin, because you can get a really big board going really quick. Okay, so moving on, also playing 3 Ultra Ball. Ultra Ball is a really good Pokemon search in this format. So discard 2 cards from your hand. If you can't discard 2 cards, you can't use this card. Search your deck for a Pokemon and then put it in your hand. So just base search a Pokemon, but the discarding cards is actually really good because it synergizes with Dark Patch. So if you're able to discard Dark Energy with the Ultra Balls early, or find a trainer in the discard and then junk arm it to get the Darks in your discard early, you can get a really aggressive start with Darkrai, and Ultra Ball is one of those cards that just kind of helps you get that turn 1 Darkrai. Okay, so let's play 3 Pokemon Catcher. Pokemon Catcher is a absolutely busted card. So busted they actually had to nerf it. So Pokemon Catcher, switch one of your opponent's active Pokemon with one of his or her benched Pokemon. So you just get to raw switch it. It's just a gust of wind. They errated it so that it's on a coin flip, but in this format, it's just you get to take it. So amazing, especially if your opponent has kind of a so-so turn, right? Like if they have a Mewtwo and they attach an energy to it, and then you get a good pop-off turn with like a Shaymin and some dark patches, you can just raw kill their Mewtwo on the bench, which can turn the tides of a game really easily if you're able to hit that with like an N in the same turn. Okay, so we're also playing 3 Eviolite. So Eviolite is a really solid tool in this format, really important for against Mewtwo with Darkrai, but also just keeps your stuff alive. So Eviolite, the Pokemon this card is attached to, if it's a basic Pokemon, any damage done to it is reduced by 20. So that's great with Darkrai because of that psychic resistance on Darkrai. So that with the Eviolite means it's taking minus 40 from Mewtwo. So it's got a honkin' 220 health if you're trying to one-shot it with a Mewtwo, which is a significant amount of health. And it needs a lot of energy to one-shot if you're going to one-shot that Darkrai. And if you're getting 2-shot, you actually have some options against that. So yeah, Eviolite is just great for keeping your Darkrai's alive. Also okay on a Mewtwo in some situations, but really there for your Darkrai's mostly. Okay, so you also play 2 Switch. It's important to keep mobile, right? Like you have Smeargles that you need to get in and out of the active. Most of the time, you're going to have that option for free retreat with Darkrai, but you don't really want to be attaching to your Smeargles or your Shaymins if you start with them. So having an option to switch is really good as well. Also, Switch helps you with your turn 1 Darkrais. Let's say you start a Mewtwo and you have a Darkrai on the bench. You have to find a way to be able to switch it out, and Switch is just your out to that. Okay, so you're also playing 2 Plus Power. Plus Power is very vital in the Mewtwo war. So Plus Power, you put it next to your active Pokemon, and then that Pokemon does 10 more damage for the turn, and then you discard it at the end of the turn. So Mewtwo does 40 damage with the next ball if it's got a double Colorless attached to it. There's another Mewtwo that has a double Colorless, and it's swinging. It's doing a fat 80 times 2 weakness is 160, but Mewtwo EX has 170 HP, so that's short. But with the Plus Power, you're not short. So with 2 Plus Power and 4 Junk Arm, you're able to kind of consistently be able to knock out other Mewtwo's if that's something that you need to do. I gotta move these cards up because I have way too many cards. Not enough space. Classic 2012. I've had to do this in like all my 2012 videos because all the Junk Arm decks have like a million trainers. Okay, so you're also playing 2 Random Receivers. The Random Receiver is a solid item card. So Random Receiver, flip cards over from the top of your deck until you reveal a supporter card and then put it in your hand. So just really solid. It just lets you find a supporter, and having your Junk Arms be options for supporters late in the game is actually really good, because as soon as you're able to play a Random Receiver, now all of a sudden all of your Junk Arms are technically supporters if you want them to be. So just a really solid option there to be able to use your Junk Arms for whatever you need them for. Okay, so getting into some of the one-ofs now. You're going to be playing one-of Max Potion. So like I was saying earlier, if you get 2-shot, it's not that big of a deal because you do play Max Potion. So let's say someone swings into your Darkrai for like 140 or 160, not a knockout. Then you have the option of just retreating, using a Shaymin, celebration winding, and then max potioning that Darkrai off. and it's essentially like your opponent wasted their last turn because their attack is not on the board anymore. So having that max potion option with 4 junk arm is really good. And you also play 1 potion, so I think this 1 potion is really neat as well. Mainly, I think that the reason that this potion is in here is for other Darkrai decks, because the Night Spear snipe 30 is actually a really big deal. Like, let's say you're playing against another Darkrai Mewtwo, and you have a Darkrai in the active and a Mewtwo on the bench. If they hit your Darkrai for 90 and your Mewtwo for 30, you don't really have any good options to attack with. Because the Darkrai, the Darkrai's going to get one shot by another Darkrai next turn in the Night Spear. And the Mewtwo, if you put the Mewtwo up, your opponent doesn't even need a plus power to knock out anymore, right? Because you have that 30 damage on there. All they need is Mewtwo DCE, which is really easy to get in this deck. So potion is great just to kind of stop those one shots from happening, right? So you can heal the 30 on the Mewtwo if you need to do that, or you could also heal the 30 off the Darkrai. That's really solid as well, just because 90 plus 90 is 180. It's a clean math on Darkrai, but if you can potion once, it makes that math a lot worse. And now all of a sudden your opponent has to hit you again, and then you're not dead, and then they have to maybe even hit you a third time. Hopefully they have a catcher, but potion just is really, really good at keeping you alive in this format. Okay, so I also play 1 Lost Remover. I love this card in this deck. So Lost Remover, take a special energy card attached to one of your opponent's Pokemon and put it in the Lost Zone. So just great for mid-game stuff versus Mewtwo. There's some other decks that it's good against as well. It's decent against Pesadillo Prism, but it's mainly there to take away DCE. Like if your opponent has Mewtwo, let's say this is you and this is your opponent, and then they have a Mewtwo in the active and you're coming up, they just killed you. Boom, you kill them and they're dead. Now they're promoting another Mewtwo, and before you knock them out, if you're able to Lost remove the DCE on this Mewtwo and then use like an N, let's say, when it comes up, if your opponent has like a 2 or 3 card hand, they have to hit DCE plus power in that hand. Otherwise, you're not getting knocked out. So just a really solid way to force your opponent into a potential whiff with Lost Remover. And if you're whiffing in the Mewtwo war, that's a really easy way to lose a game there. Okay. So you're also playing 1, and forgive me if I butcher the name because this card is in Spanish, but you're playing 1 Tropical Tidal Wave, I believe is the card. So Tropical Tidal Wave is a promo card from Worlds 2010 and 2005. It might have been from a couple other years as well. They might have just done it when they went to Hawaii, because I know that in 2010 they went to Hawaii. But yeah, so anyway, Tropical Tidal Wave says, flip a coin. If heads, discard all tool cards attached to your opponent's Pokemon, and if tails, discard all tool cards attached to your Pokemon. So this is mainly to get Eviolite out of there. Eviolite can be a big pain on your math. Like I was saying, if you put it on a Darkrai, you don't 2-shot a Darkrai with a Darkrai, so that's a big pain. But having an option to be able to get rid of your opponent's Eviolites, same thing with a Mewtwo, right? Like if they have damage, but then they also have an Eviolite, then you might not knock them out. So having that option, just be able to discard those Eviolites, is really clutch. Kind of sucks if you flip tails, but if you play your Eviolites right and try to mitigate your Eviolite drops before you need to drop Tropical Tidal Wave, then it's a little bit less of an issue as well. Okay, so getting into the supporter cards, starting off with 4 Professor Juniper, staple for every Darkrai deck in this format. I think less than 4 Juniper is pretty wrong, pretty incorrect. But Professor Juniper, discard your hand until you have 7. Discard your hand and then draw cards until you have 7 cards in your hand. So just a discard, draw 7, really good, really just solid draw. One of the best draw supporters Pokemon's printed. And the reason it's really good in this deck is because if you find Dark Energies in your starting hand and a Juniper, getting multiple Dark Energies into the discard turn 1 just opens your odds up to hit that turn 1 Darkrai so much more. Another reason this card is so good is because you're able to Smeargle for it. You can potentially get 2 Junipers off in the same turn, which seems kind of bad. Discarding all those resources seems bad, but with Junk Arm and Dark Patch, being able to get the Dark Energies back and the Trainers back, it's actually not that big of a deal. And being able to draw 14 on your first turn is pretty nutty. Okay, so also play 4 N. So N is a really solid card in this format as well. So N, each player shuffles his or her hand into his or her deck and then draws for their amount of remaining prize cards. So early game, it's a really solid shuffle draw 6. And then later into the game, like I was saying a little bit before, it could be a bit of a disruption option, right? Like if you lose Lost Remover and N in the same combo, that can be really deadly against your opponent, or even just forcing your opponent to potentially whiff, right? Like if you're playing Mewtwo Wars and you miss the Lost Remover, but they have a DCE on there and you have a DCE on your Mewtwo, all they need is a plus power to knock out. And if they have a hand of 6, like all they need is a Junk Arm and a plus power in their discard or a plus power in their hand, and that's just really sketchy. So being able to shuffle your opponent's hand back into the deck is just a really good disruption option. And then you also play 2 Pont. So Professor Oak's New Theory, another just really good supporter. There's so many good supporters in this format. So shuffle your hand to your deck, draw 6. Another shuffle draw 6 into the early game, but it's also shuffle draw 6 into the late game as well. It's essentially N early game and then as well as late game as well. So being able to have that shuffle draw 6, just being able to draw cards is amazing. Okay, so getting into the energy line, we're going to be playing 9 Dark, which I think is amazing. Some Darkrai lists I've seen run 8, which I think is like fine, but you just really want to see Darks on your first turn, right? Like if you see double Dark Ultra Ball, then your turn 1 is popping off. It's a really solid turn 1. Or, you know, Dark Trainer that you can play in a Junk Arm. You know, it really depends what you have, but having Darks just lets you hit your Dark Patch and Darkrai combos, and that's kind of what the deck wants to do. So playing more Dark, I think that's really great, and I think the 9 count is amazing for that. Okay, then you also play 4 DCE. Obviously, attacking with Mewtwo is great, and being able to one-shot a Mewtwo back for a single attachment without having to use Celebration Wind, because you don't really want to take those energies off your Darkrai's unless you really have to. So being able to just go DCE plus power KO with a Mewtwo is really, really solid. Okay, well, this has been Darkrai Mewtwo from 2012, Yuta Komatsuda's top 8 list. If you have any questions about the deck, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to get to them. And if you're not subbed, hit that sub button, because we are doing a giveaway at 500 subs. We're super close. Got lots of cool stuff we're going to do in this giveaway, but yeah, not going to get there until 500. We're super close, though. But yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time.